We move on now to item 17, concerning accreditation of new non-governmental organizations and the review of accredited non-governmental organizations. Mr. Secretary, the floor is yours to present this item to committee members.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. You will note from the document this time that it is divided into three parts. The first relates to the accreditation of new non-governmental organizations. The second relates to the review of accredited non-governmental organizations, and the third is some observations on the participation of accredited non-government organizations. For the interest of time, please allow me not to go into details of the document. I would only highlight some observations concerning the participation of accredited NGOs under the Convention. Firstly, as you will see in the document, there seems to be a need to elaborate the inter alia advisory functions of NGOs, as the majority of NGOs have not in reality been concretely involved in the work of the committee, since only 6 NGOs can be engaged in the evaluation body at any given time. And to address this challenge, the committee may wish to elaborate on what these inter alia functions mean and what it requires from non-governmental organizations in order to maximize the benefit of partnerships with accredited non-governmental organizations. Secondly, we note that there are some inconsistencies in the criteria for accreditation and those for review of accreditation. The accreditation requests are mostly evaluated against information related to the administrative and legal status of the organizations, together with a description of their activities. Meanwhile, renewals are determined by the contribution of NGOs to the statutory activities of the committee and their activities at the bilateral, sub-regional, regional, or international levels. To ensure coherence in the process, the committee, again, for this reason, may wish to revise the criteria of accreditation in view of these inter alia functions it requires from the NGOs in paragraph 19. The document also draws your attention to the ICH NGO Forum, a consortium of accredited NGOs, which seems to be developing considerably. It could be encouraged to play a more active role should the committee clarify these inter alia functions. It might wish to give it. Also, please note that the problem of geographical imbalance persists, and it sometimes becomes challenging to identify an adequate number of NGO candidates from certain electoral groups for the evaluation body. It is important to explore practical methods to redress the disparity in geographical distribution. Following these observations, it is becoming clear the committee would need first to reflect on inter alia advisory functions, and then also the committee may wish to deliberate on moving towards a system that is flexible enough to allow committee to benefit more from the diverse sets of expertise and services of NGOs. Thank you, Mr. Chairperson.
Thank you, Mr. Tim Curtis. I now open the floor. Does anybody wish to take the floor? I recognize the distinguished permanent delegate of Philippines.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We agree that the network of accredited NGOs should be more balanced in terms of equitable geographic representation. We also think that possibilities to maximize our engagement with the NGO network be explored. We hope that the committee can reflect on appropriate measures on this for future sessions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Now, Turkey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We thank the Secretariat for their efforts, for the accreditation requests and the analytic report reflecting on the current distribution and function of NGOs. We observe that the majority of accredited NGOs are in Group 1, Likewise, the majority of the 29 NGOs whose accreditation is maintained are in Group 1. We hope that the geographical representation of NGOs would become more balanced in the future. Through enhancing the visibility of convention, and NGOs are further promoted through capacity building and international assistance. We also observe that the majority of accredited NGOs are not able to observe the meetings of the committee. The role of Secretariat as the facilitator for NGOs could be highlighted in this regard. Following the decisions of the governing bodies, the number of accredited NGOs would be 179. The collaborations between NGOs and the work done via ICH NGO forums in parallel with the committee's deliberations are quite important. On the other hand, pertaining to Article 9 of the Convention and the paragraphs 27 and 28 and 91 to 99 of the operational directives, the direct participation of NGOs as advisors is possible if their representatives are elected for 4 years to the 6 seats allocated to the NGOs in the evaluation body. This rather limited mandate is, in our view, not enough for the motivation and active contribution of NGOs to the committee. We believe new ways and methods should be developed for NGOs to participate more effectively in the committee's work. For example, requests under 100,000 for international assistance and periodical reports are being reviewed by the Bureau. We also take into consideration our Bureau experience that it will be useful to decide on these files following the simultaneous and separate advisory reports of the 3 NGOs would provide for the NGOs to participate in the committee's work while also reducing the workload of the Bureau. For this reason, we think that there's a need for new regulations on accreditation of NGOs and their participation in the work of committee. For this, we consider that it will be useful to address this topic in an informal and open-ended working group within the scope of Article 8 of the Convention. As Turkish delegation, we support the accreditation of 29 NGOs in line with the proposal of the Secretariat, are looking forward to their effective participation in the work of the committee after the approval of the General Assembly of the state parties in 2018. We also welcome that 3 of these 29 NGOs are from Turkey with regards to the increasing interests of non-governmental organizations in our country. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Turkey and Palestine. And followed by Austria, Palestine first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Very quickly, I would like first to thank our colleagues from Philippine delegation and from the Turkish delegation regarding the balance for the accredited NGOs. I really support what has been said, and we look forward to see the balance regarding the accredited NGOs for this convention. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Palestine. Now, Austria.
Thank you. I would also like to confirm that we are not happy with the imbalance, the geographical imbalance of NGOs, and welcome all steps that would kind of find a solution to that. Maybe one word to the ICH NGO Forum. We think this is excellent, and we congratulate the NGOs that have organized the NGO Forum this time so excellently, and we would encourage them to continue their work. And as to the committee, I think we would kind of welcome if we could give them a more active role also for the committee to have the ICH NGO Forum also more involved in specific roles here with our work. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished delegate of Austria. I now give the floor to Senegal.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je ne reviens pas sur les déclarations qui m'ont précédé, sur l'équilibre. Je voulais simplement rebondir sur comment essayer de maximiser l'apport des ONG au niveau du comité à travers le forum et à travers également l'appui conseil. Mais au-delà du comité, moi je m'intéresse beaucoup plus à la participation effective des ONG au niveau des États parties. Je pense que c'est important parce que les ONG peuvent jouer un rôle, et elles jouent déjà un rôle extrêmement important sur le terrain. Et donc, c'est un devoir des États parties de les associer à toutes les activités de mise en œuvre de la Convention. Mais, d'un autre côté, il y a quand même que ces ONG, quelquefois, ne sont pas du tout connues par les États parties. Il y a des ONG qui existent, qui ne sont pas du tout connues. Moi, j'en ai vu au Sénégal, nous travaillons avec beaucoup d'ONG, mais d'autres sont totalement méconnues et je ne vois pas comment également on peut les accréditer si ces ONG ne travaillent pas directement avec les États. Un, c'est le devoir des États de les convier. Deux, c'est également une obligation aux des ONG vraiment de se rapprocher également, de travailler sur le terrain pour qu'elles soient visibles et connues par les États. Je vous remercie.
Okay. Yeah, thank you so much. We heard from various committee members stressing the need for a little fairer, more equitable geographical representation, and also the other very excellent and relevant observations and suggestions. So I think from committee members, we have completed our discussions. So I now give the floor to our observer members. I recognize Belgium.
Thank you very much. As it is the first time the Belgian delegation takes the floor, we would first like to thank and congratulate our Korean host for the excellent organization of the 12th session of the Intergovernmental Committee. We very warmly welcome the reflection about the inter alia functions of the NGOs, and in that regard we would like to recall decision 10 COM 15A 9 and 10 in Windhoek about ethics. In decision 9, the Secretariat is requested to develop an online platform with a toolkit based on the 12 ethical principles, and in point 10 the committee invited, and we quote, accredited NGOs to participate in enriching, sharing information, following up and contributing to update the online platform with tools of ethics for safeguarding intangible cultural heritage. So decision 10, COM 15A, 9 and 10 gives a very concrete example of inter alia functions that can still be activated. Thank you very much.
I think we have heard from committee members and observer members. Now I'd like to open the floor for non-governmental organizations. If there are any NGOs wishing to take floors, please raise your hands. Yes. You have the floor, and from before taking floor, identify your NGOs.
Oui, merci, Monsieur le Président. Diego Gradis de Tradition pour Demain pour le Forum des ONG. Je souhaiterais apporter quelques remarques finales de la part du Forum des ONG à l'issue de cette semaine, sans omettre, bien sûr, encore une fois, de remercier la Corée pour son accueil. Je ne reviendrai pas sur la question de l'organe d'évaluation que nous avons traité hier lors de notre intervention sur le point 12. Le Forum accueillera favorablement les possibilités de préciser la dimension inter alia de ses fonctions consultatives au comité au-delà de l'organe d'évaluation, et ça a été indirectement déjà mentionné par certains membres du comité à l'instant. La création à cet effet d'un groupe de travail serait la bienvenue avec notre participation, les ONG, si vous le souhaitez. Nous avons, par exemple, démontré la contribution que nous pouvons apporter dans la définition du cadre global de résultats lors du groupe de travail de Chengdu en juin. Parlant de groupe, le Forum a bien avancé dans son travail de régionalisation, tant dans la composition de son comité de pilotage que par la construction de réseaux dans les régions afin de catalyser les ONG et leurs efforts pour le PCI. On retrouve aussi, au niveau des différents groupes de travail que nous avons déjà évoqués lundi dans notre intervention, cette régionalisation, donc je n'y reviendrai pas. Enfin, nous remercions une fois encore l'Indonésie, la Korea Heritage Foundation, pour leur soutien, pour l'atelier de renforcement de capacité de la semaine dernière, et ISHCAP, pour son soutien permanent et encore récemment pour la publication de Heritage Alive sur la médecine traditionnelle. Merci au secrétariat pour avoir exprimé le défi pour le forum que représente recevoir encore plus de soutien pour accomplir sa mission, pour renforcer la Convention, comme nous espérons avoir pu le faire ici à Jeju. Merci à l'Autriche, à la Turquie, à la Palestine, au Sénégal, à la Belgique pour leurs interventions. Enfin, le forum se réjouit de participer à l'Assemblée en juin et à la prochaine session du comité à Maurice et ainsi poursuivre sa collaboration avec les organes de la Convention pour la sauvegarde du PCI et pour les ONG, sa collaboration sur le terrain avec les communautés. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, and I recognize another NGO, so please identify your NGO before taking floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On behalf of the China Folklore Society, an accredited NGO and incumbent member of the evaluation body, I would like to take this opportunity to thank the Republic of Korea for its excellent hospitality and wonderful organization for the 12th session of the committee. We'd like to express our deepest gratitude to the committee for reviewing the periodical report by China Folklore Society. Our sincere thanks also go to the Secretariat for its continuous support and efficient assistance all the way through. We also want to thank other NGOs, experts, members of the evaluation body for your help and inspiration during the working process we share. China Folklore Society values the opportunity to serve the committee as one of the first members of the evaluation body during the past 3 years, from which CFS has benefited greatly and learned working methodologies, good practice of state parties, and information sharing experiences generated from the 4 mechanisms of international cooperation. As a result, our overall understanding of the goals and principles of the Convention and capacity has been enhanced. Also, as an outgoing member, we feel relieved and confident for what we have done during our term. Nevertheless, we also share our top concern with all involved actors and the expertise and the independency of the evaluation body should be fully respected. We welcome all the new members of the E-body and look forward to a more efficient E-body to better fulfill its duty for the committee. CFS would continue to devote itself to further promoting the safeguarding of ICH at local, national, regional, and international levels. Thank you all for your attention.
Thank you, the NGO from China. And any other NGOs wishing to take the floor? I see none. Now, let us move to the decision. Please refer to document ITH/17/12.com/17 and this draft decision in para 24. Can we see it on screens? May I ask the committee to adopt draft decision 12.com/17 as shown on the screens? Let us proceed, para by para. Para 1, citing the document we have examined. I see no objections. Para 1, adopted. Para 2, recalling the relevant paras from Convention and OD. I see no objections, adopted. Para 3, recalling the previous decisions of GA and of the committee. It's very objective. It's adopted. Para 4, recommending to GAE the accreditation of 29 NGOs. Are there any objections or questions? Seeing none, para 4 is adopted. Para 5, deciding on the renewal of the accreditation of 42 NGOs. Seeing no objection, adopted. Para 6, terminating the accreditation of 17 NGOs which have not demonstrated their contribution and commitment to the work of the committee. Are there any objections? Seeing none, para 6, adopted. Para 7, acknowledging the need to reflect on the relevance of the current accreditation system. Are there any comments, objections? I think we already have heard some very good suggestions. So, para 7, adopted. Para 8, inviting the Secretariat to reflect on possible ways forward and report to the committee at its 13th session next year. Philippines.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson. Since this issue is an issue which calls the attention of all states parties as well as reflected in the discussion, we have a proposal here to this paragraph to invite and it's a way to facilitate discussion among states parties with accredited NGOs. So invites the informal ad hoc working group and the Secretariat. We know that under a different agenda item, we will talk about the report of the ad hoc working group, and I think the consensus, well, we don't want to preempt the decision, but the consensus, I think, is to extend that mandate of the informal ad hoc working group. So we could invite this group, which would be open to committee members and states parties, to continue to also have reflections. I think we should not limit the discussion to just the Secretariat. We should get inputs from all states parties, since it is the mandate of the committee and as ratifying states parties to the convention to promote the objectives and the spirit of the convention through, among others, engagement with civil society and accredited NGOs. Thank you.
Philippines, can you elaborate some specific language or on the screen invites the informal ad hoc working group and the Secretariat? All right, okay, yeah. So, Palestine.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like just to thank our colleague from Philippines. Indeed, his suggestion is absolutely appropriate, and we would like to support his proposal because, as he mentioned, this reflection concerns not only the Secretariat, but also member states and especially members of the committee. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Palestine, and Turkey, Hungary, and Turkey first.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We would like, sorry, Mr. Chair, it's the last day of our meeting and I think I'm a bit confused. We would like to support the proposal that came from Philippines. That's very relevant. But we are not quite sure if we should put the informal ad hoc working group to first, because it reads as such that informal ad hoc working group will also consult with the accredited NGOs. If the reading is as such, we don't think it will be appropriate for us as state parties to also consult with the NGOs, but I think it's more appropriate if Secretariat does it with the NGOs. But in the meantime, in parallel to that, as state parties, we reflected among ourselves the role of the NGOs. So if you could shift the wording, starting by invites the Secretariat, I don't know, some wording in these lines, if I'm clear. Thank you.
Thank you, Turkey. Now I give the floor to Hungary.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I would also like to thank our colleague from the Philippines for proposing this amendment, and Hungary would like to be added to the list of co-sponsors. From our side, we like the original wording because if the moment comes, we believe that a consultation with the NGOs and the ad hoc working group could be useful. So from our side, we are completely comfortable with the original wording. Maybe we could change and say invites the Secretariat and the informal ad hoc working group. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Hungary, and I'm asking delegation of Turkey. There are some proposals that as it is, and Turkey proposed some disposition of ad hoc working group and the Secretariat, the positioning of ad hoc working group. But Turkey, are you okay with the formulation as it is, or can you propose? Okay, Turkey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We are not against, for sure, to consult with the accredited NGOs, but in the context of the informal ad hoc working group, the setting so far, from our experience, would not enable us to do so in an efficient manner, because we will have a lot of things to do in the working group that we will discuss it in the coming agenda item. And I'm not sure if we have time also to consult with the NGOs, at least this year. Otherwise, if we continue to work next year, we may consider consulting the NGOs as well. And we are very much open to it, but it would be more, if the Secretariat could do that work and their work could fit into our work, could be even more appropriate. But if the consensus in the room is to go along with the original, we won't be against it. Thank you.
Thank you, Turkey. Now I give the floor to Philippines.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We prefer the original formulation, but we could be flexible in the placing, and we thank the distinguished colleague from Hungary. If it's agreeable, then to put it after the Secretary, that's no problem. And just to respond to our distinguished colleague from Turkey, it's a recommendation, it's an invitation. The ad hoc working group could then be free to determine its procedures and timeline as well. So it's just an invitation. It doesn't necessarily have to finish such work. It could be, we see it much more as a continuing possibility, but the issue itself is very important, and there's no other way, Mr. Chairperson, to consult on this in a way, in a kind of organized fashion, rather than the ad hoc working group, which has been a useful practice, not just here, but in other committees as well. So we'd like to keep the original, but we're okay with moving it after the Secretariat. Thank you.
Thank you, Philippines. So I think we must have consensus. New para 8 edition of the informal ad hoc working group after the Secretariat. So any other strong objections to this new edition after Secretariat, the informal ad hoc working group? Seeing no objection, para 8 is adopted as amended. Para 9, encouraging NGOs from underrepresented electoral groups to submit requests for accreditation. We have debated and fully, so I see no objections. Para 9, adopted. We have now adopted each of the paras, and we need to adopt the decision as a whole. Seeing no objections, okay. Before taking the decision, I give the floor to St. Lucia.
Mr. Chairman, apologies. I know we have adopted 6, and probably my mind was working very slow. It's the last day, but there is a little concern I have, and I just want to express it for the records, and that is in relation to the NGOs that we have agreed to terminate their accreditation. In the light of our concerns about the imbalance, the regional imbalance, the huge imbalance, I see we are terminating at least 3 from regions close to me who really have little representation: Cuba, Vietnam, and Brazil. And I would have liked to talk a little bit about the termination of these in the view of we already have such a heavy imbalance, and then we have these that we are terminating. I see there's no member from Cuba here to defend it, to talk about it. But I just wanted to register the concern. I know we have already adopted 6, but just for the purpose of registering it, it is a concern that I have, that we are terminating what we already do not have, and we are terminating the little that we have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, St. Lucia. I think your concerns will be taken note of seriously by our committee members. And having said this, I therefore declare decision 12.com/17 as a whole is adopted. Okay. Mr. Secretary, do you have something to add up?
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. I just wanted to address the concerns, and very valid concerns, raised by St. Lucia. Indeed, a number of non-governmental organizations were not renewed because they simply did not respond or reply to the reporting. So when we do not receive and we send to all NGOs on their reporting on their activities, we simply have no basis to justify the renewal of their accreditation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. This one. Okay, let's get back to item 18.